Welcome back to the show. My name's Mark Nixon, and do I ever have a show for you today. Now that the election is finished, and we now know that Mark Carney has been crowned the Prime Minister of Canada, is Alberta separation a reality? We're going to get into it. Danielle Smith just held a press conference and lays out exactly where Alberta is at. There's so much information in this press conference, and what I've done is I've reduced the press conference from 1 hour to 23 minutes, all of the highlights and the most important information. Let's not waste a single minute. Let's get into it. Let's go.
Letter sent to yourself and one also sent to the Prime Minister from the Chief of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and the Chief of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. They say that you're attempting to manufacture a national unity crisis by enabling a referendum on separatism. My question to you is, what will your government do to ensure any referendums respect and do not breach Treaties 6, 7, and 8?
Well, first let me say that we respect all of the treaty rights that are enshrined in the Constitution under Section 35. And the Citizen Initiative Act is not new legislation, and it was never designed to, nor does it breach treaty agreements. The Citizen Initiative Act, I think, is the purest form of democracy we have, and it gives all Albertans an opportunity to play a direct role in the democratic process by inviting them to have a direct say on issues their fellow citizens want to put to the people. Any Albertan can put an idea forward on any topic, and if they're able to get the number of signatures, then it would go to a vote, and that includes a vote of members of First Nations, and we encourage Indigenous peoples to participate in the process.
My follow-up is, and I know that you said that you want a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, and I see that you're saying that this would be the purest form of democracy, but you've also lowered the threshold for any referendum to happen, which we know will very much probably include a referendum on Alberta separatism. Are you risking the province's relationship with Indigenous people to appease a vocal minority who want to separate from Canada?
The changes that are proposed in the Elections Act, I had put in the minister's mandate letter when I first signed off on it in 2023. And it was in looking at the way in which propositions are put forward around the world, in particular California, which seems to have the most successful opportunity for citizens to engage in the process. They have anywhere from 5 to 10 propositions every year, but their measures are actually quite a bit lower than ours. It's 5% for a statutory change based on the previous level of vote for the governor, and 8% for constitutional changes. So actually ours is still higher than what we see in other jurisdictions. It needs to be high. But it also needs to be achievable, and that's what we're trying to achieve with this balance.
I just feel like I'm not getting an answer, though, on whether this could be a risk in terms of the province's relationships with Indigenous people.
Well, I'm not going to prejudge what citizens are going to do for a petition. Once there's a petition on the table and there's an active discussion from citizens having achieved the requisite number of signatures, I'd be happy to answer your question. Right now, this is just enabling legislation so that any citizen is able to go out, garner signatures, and if they're successful, then I guess you can ask me to comment on what is actually on the table. You're putting forward a hypothetical that doesn't exist.
Yeah, just further to that, asking you to speak directly to those First Nations leaders. There's some strong language in here calling your statements and actions irresponsible and demanding you step down from your conduct immediately. What is your response directly to them, and how would you characterize, I guess, your perception of your relationship with them when they are seeming quite frustrated?
Well, I can see that the media is trying to describe this legislation as something it's not. It's a citizen initiative change that any petition can come forward. I gave some examples in the legislature yesterday. In California, which is a very left-wing jurisdiction, they have brought forward petitions on rent control. They brought forward petitions on legalizing cannabis. I would just encourage people to not look at this through an ideological lens. If you've got an issue that is important to you, that you think can garner the support of your fellow citizens, get out there, start a petition campaign. Once this legislation is passed, you have 120 days. You'll be able to, based on the previous voter turnout, you'd be able to get 177,000 signatures, and you can put it to the people in the next scheduled referendum election.
You're saying it's not about ideology or separation, and yet I want to get your thoughts on a recent Facebook post from your party president on Tuesday, posting a video from your news conference on those election law changes. The party president wrote, "This announcement is giving you the pathway some of you are seeking today," with one commenting saying, "We want a path charting to independence or the 51st state, nothing else." To which the party president said, "Please read her announcement, it's in there."
The Citizens Initiative referenda legislation applies to all questions. We want to make fairness across the board. 10% of the previous voter turnout on any question. And again, I'm not going to prejudge what citizens are going to put forward for a question. From the moment, from what I can see, there are no active petitions. There are no questions out there being debated. And I look forward to seeing what comes forward when citizens take action and get to that bar. Remember, the purpose of a referendum is to let every single Albertan have a say on matters of important public policy. Every other decision we make is a delegated decision to a member of the Legislative Assembly. We don't necessarily, through the Legislative Assembly, deal with everything that's of interest to Albertans. So this is enabling direct democracy. I think we should embrace it.
Do you support the efforts to hold a referendum on Alberta separating from Canada?
I support the process of citizens being able to choose an issue that they care about and then being able to get enough signatures to put it to the people. And I guess we'll have to wait and see what comes forward on that.
And what is your personal position on Alberta separating from
My
Canada?
personal position is I believe in Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada.
What does that mean?
It means like what we're doing today. When the federal government violates the Constitution, goes out of their way to interfere with our exclusive jurisdiction, we are going to meet them with every step that we can in order to preserve our ability to manage our own affairs. And in today's announcement, particularly for electricity, we are simply not going to allow the federal government, based on ideology, to violate the Constitution and put our people at risk of being in blackout during the dead of winter or the heat of summer. We're just not going to do it. So these are the kind of things that you can expect to see from our government, and we'll do more of them if we have to.
Hi, sorry, Premier, it kind of feels like you're being disingenuous here. You're not acknowledging what your party president said. You're not acknowledging that there are people gathering outside the legislature today calling for a separation referendum. You're not acknowledging that there are many groups of people in this province who read your proposed legislation as an open door, as an invitation to bring this referendum forward. I mean, do you acknowledge that this has opened the door for them to get it? This is fanning the flames of the fire. Well, I acknowledge that.
I can read the media just as you can, and I can read the polls just as you can. And Angus Reid did a poll a couple of weeks ago that said that there was independence support of 25% of Albertans and higher, I think 33% of Saskatchewan residents. That seems to me that the majority of people are not in favor of that. And so I guess we'll see whether or not they're able to put together a petition, gather enough signatures, and put it to the people. I think you're kind of jumping ahead a few steps. We have initiative legislation that has been in the works from my minister since I wrote his mandate letter in 2023, when this was not an active conversation. This legislation came forward now because we have a whole pile of rules that we need to change, because we have to start preparing for provincial election in 2027. So this is just part of the process. And we had heard from the public on both our recall legislation and our citizen initiative that the bars were set too high, and they wanted us to bring them down so that certain questions could be achieved through a petition campaign at a more reasonable level. We looked around the world. We looked at California, which I think is really the hallmark of this type of legislation, and we brought our amounts down to align with that.
And I need to ask about this lawsuit, or referring this issue to the Court of Appeal. Can you just walk me through the timeline here, because I'm confused. In March, the Premier had a list of 9 demands to whomever becomes Prime Minister, and one of them was this issue, to address this issue. Mark Carney hasn't appointed a cabinet yet. We don't know who the Environment Minister is. We have not hit that 6-month mark. It seems like they haven't even had a chance to address it. So why are you bringing this forward now?
Well, most certainly. Let me take you back just a little bit. We know that the clean electricity regulations were introduced in 2024. We tried to work with the federal government to try and provide our input time and again to see if we could help address some of our concerns. They were ignored. During the course of the election, as you already know, Prime Minister Carney doubled down repeatedly on his position as it relates to various things, including the clean energy regulations. We've seen no indication that it is going to change. It is our intention now to refer the matter to the Court of Appeal. Now, the process, as you asked about, is that we will refer it today to the Court of Appeal. We will work with the Court of Appeal on scheduling. Our internal counsel will be handling this matter, and we'll just move through the process like we always do.
Talk about direct democracy. This has been interesting to mention California. It's come under a lot of criticism. You got a lot of these initiatives that confuse voters, and you're elected as a representative. That's what we normally do in Canada. Look at Brexit, for example. So you have a government doing one thing, elected to do something. You have initiatives, and Brexit's a clear example of how that tripped up the process, and people actually voted for something, not really understanding what they were voting for. It's caused all kinds of problems. But you want to do direct democracy now in Alberta as opposed to representative democracy?
Well, I'm inheriting a system of and a history of direct democracy that we've had in this province. A prohibition, I think, was ended through direct democracy. We had votes on VLTs in communities in '98. We've had votes both for and against fluoride in Calgary. And the former premier had put forward a citizen initiative framework at the provincial level that we just discovered, and from feedback, was a little bit too strict. And so we've brought the rules in alignment with what we think is going to be achievable to allow for people to have a say. So I think direct democracy has a long history in Alberta, and we're just going to make sure that citizens are able to identify issues they care about so that they can vote on them directly.
And speaking of then direct democracy, when it comes to the pension plan, what's happening with that? And you mentioned the poll earlier. With a poll, I think it was a Leger poll in February, saying that 55% of Albertans do not want an Alberta pension plan. So that poll is showing that the majority do not want it. What's actually happening with the pension plan initiative?
Well, I have said that I would put it to the people if I saw evidence they wanted to vote on it. I'm not seeing that at the moment. I think part of it is that we don't have all the answers that we were hoping for from the federal government about what the transfer would be. But again, that's another issue that could be put to citizen initiative. If I'm misreading the public on that and they want to have an actual vote on it, then that's another issue that could be put forward by citizen initiative. But at the moment, I'm seeing, again, same results you are. I'm not seeing that there's an appetite to put it to the people at the moment.
Canola is a $44 billion industry. It supports 206,000 jobs, 40,000 Western farmers. Yet Prime Minister Carney, during his campaign and even now, has said nothing about the 100% retaliatory Chinese tariffs on canola thanks to the Liberals' green protectionist EV policies. So what is your government doing to ensure the canola tariffs are treated with the same urgency by the feds as the auto and steel sector one?
Well, I can tell you that all of the Western premiers who have a large canola industry in their provinces, and that is regardless of political stripe, have raised it directly with the Prime Minister. It seems like it's a bit of a phony war. We've got a 100% tax on EV vehicles from China that no one's buying in order to protect an EV industry in Ontario that doesn't exist. And in return, we are seeing punishment on pork and canola in our Western provinces, which are products people do want. So I think the Chinese have been very targeted and direct in how they're trying to split our country up. And I think we need to revisit that. We obviously are going to have to find new markets for our products, but let's at least engage in proportionate responses rather than having a knee-jerk reaction that is only going to hurt our industries further. And that has been conveyed by myself as well as other premiers directly to the Prime Minister.
The Bloc leader, who will hold some power and influence over Carney's minority cabinet, has just said that there's no future for oil and gas in Quebec or anywhere for that matter. Carney has also said he would allow a Quebec veto over pipelines. So how does Alberta then respond if no pipelines east is the deal that helps Carney keep his government from falling?
Well, I would hope that's not the case. The Canadian people did not vote for fringe voices like the Bloc Québécois or fringe voices like the Green Party or fringe voices like the NDP to control the agenda for the next while here. What Albertans and Canadians voted for was for Canada to become an economic superpower. And that means also an energy superpower. And that is what I would fully expect Mark Carney to do. I hope that he's able to continue forward with an agenda that perhaps even the Conservative opposition would support him in. That's what I think the message of the election is. And I would surely hope that he's not listening to fringe voices from a party that is solely committed to breaking this country up.
Hi there. I'm just wondering what parts of the final regulations fell short in terms of, in your view? Because in the first draft regulations that were put out, Alberta responded. There were issues with cogeneration units. There were issues with how emergencies would be dealt with. The feds, in their final version, they say they updated the regulations to account for those criticisms. But obviously, this isn't meeting what you guys are asking for. So I'm just wondering specifically, what the feds try to give you and how did it fall short?
Well, it's not what they're trying to give us. I look at the outcome. I look at what are the projects that are being put forward to the electric system operator and the Alberta Utilities Commission for approval. And we have 0 large-scale natural gas plants being proposed. That tells me something about the level of uncertainty that natural gas plants have. Because remember, this is written as criminal violation, if you do not meet the target by 2035. So what CEO is going to by 2035, building with today's technology, be able to guarantee a 95% abatement on their CO2 within 10 years with technology that doesn't exist, on risk of going to jail. And I'm going to tell you there are zero. And so that is the nature of the problem that we have. When natural gas plants get built on today's technology, they have about a 25-year time horizon in order that they don't have stranded assets. And so that's why we have asked the federal government to align around emissions reduction policy that's reasonable around 2050. That's what the rest of the world is committing to. China's committing to 2060. India's committing to 2070. China and India are both bringing on coal plants at a rate that far exceeds anything that we produce in Canada. And so why would we punish our industry? Why would we risk blackouts? Why would we risk grid instability for an unachievable target? Why not work with us to try to find best available technology without these punitive measures? And I can turn it over to my Minister of Affordability Utilities, and he can tell you about the chill that is putting on investment directly.
Yeah, Premier, you did a great job with that. Again, it's achievable targets. 95% for carbon capture is just not going to happen. And the technology cost today is in the billions. So when their investment tax credit only covers half of that, which company is going to abandon $1 billion to do something that's not giving any return on investment? It's not realistic, it's not achievable, and it doesn't help us get anywhere. We're making practical, reasonable steps by allowing in legislation hydrogen blending, allowing Albertans to choose. We're finding responsible, reasonable pathways. We just need time. And I think the Premier summed it up very well.
How would you describe how the feds took into account your feedback? Was it a matter of they chipped away at the edges of what you were talking about and didn't touch any of the substantive stuff, or how did you hear your thoughts?
Well, they don't respect the Constitution. Section 92 of the Constitution not only enumerates our exclusive jurisdiction, that's the word in the Constitution, exclusive jurisdiction over resource development and the development of electricity. And there's a reason for that. It's because every province has different endowments and different abilities to generate electricity. That is why it has been assigned to the provinces to make these decisions. I wonder how Mark Carney would feel if I started regulating in an area of federal jurisdiction and you asked him, oh, well, as long as it's, modifying around the edges, are you okay with them developing their own currency or developing their own approach to weights and measures or establishing military installations? The answer would be no, it's not my jurisdiction. And that is foundationally the problem. This is not their jurisdiction. So it doesn't matter what kind of modifications they're going to say, it violates the Constitution, and we're going to argue that vigorously in court.
Riddle me this one. How confident are you that the new Prime Minister will listen to you, given the following facts? One, he is still in favor of the emissions cap. Two, he said he's not going to repeal Bill C-69. Three, when he was asked in Calgary by yours truly to make a commitment that his energy corridor would include pipelines, oil and gas pipelines, and LNG, and he would not commit. At that same news conference, he dismissed your 9 demands in a single sentence, saying he had his own plans, and he still has many of the Trudeau team people who have, let's just say, disappointed Alberta in the past with their views, including your close and personal friend, Stephen Guilbeault. So how confident are you, given all of those facts that we know so far?
It depends very much on whether we have pragmatic Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney as our Prime Minister, or whether we have environmental extremist, keep it in the ground, phase out fossil fuels, author of the book Values, Mark Carney as Prime Minister. And I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't think Canadians know the answer to that yet, because as I continue to point out, he said different things to different people in different parts of the province or country in different languages. So we won't really know until we see the decisions he's making for cabinet. We won't really know until I've had an opportunity to speak with him, which I will be this week. And so we'll do a readout of that conversation, and I'll be able to tell you then.
And the supplementary question, I kind of find it funny that a few weeks ago, everybody thought even the possibility of somebody getting enough signatures for a referendum on Alberta independence was just the work of a few yahoos. And now, obviously, people are very serious about it now. That being said, since the election, and you saw the returns as much as I did, and the overwhelming Conservative vote, what have you heard, and what have your MLAs heard about the mood out there in Alberta with regards to the election of the Carney Liberal government? What are they hearing? What feedback are you hearing? What feedback are they hearing from people, especially on this Alberta file?
I think it's split. There's lots of people sending me texts and emails saying, give it a chance, do what you can, put forward your policies, see if the different leadership makes a difference, see if we can mend the country together, see if we can find a way to have them change course on some of the bad policies of his predecessor, and let's try to make it work. Let's try to make Canada aspirationally what people wanted. People during this election wanted a Team Canada and a Canada First approach that supported every region, supported every province in its aspirations. So give that a chance. That's one side. And the other side is we're fed up that we have been targeted for the last 10 years with aggressive policy to keep our energy resources, our substantial energy resources in the ground. The reason we send so much of our product to the United States is that it's easier to build pipelines going south than it is east, west, and north. And it shouldn't be that way. And we're fed up. So I'm hearing both camps. And so we'll be having a caucus meeting tomorrow where I'm going to be able to hear directly from each of my MLAs to see if they're hearing the same things I am. But I think my job is to try to do what I can. I put on the table the 9 issues that I think will reset the relationship with Alberta. I will be talking with the Prime Minister and making our case very, very clearly about what it is that we think we need to do to reset and be that energy powerhouse. And I'll gauge the result based on his actions. And we'll know pretty quickly whether or not he's going to make some movement on those things.
I'm just wondering, do you have a breaking point where you would then consider independence?
I would always allow for citizens to put forward their own ideas about what they think our path forward should be. I put forward my ideas of what I think the path forward should be. It's the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. It's affirming our Constitution. It is doing the kind of advocacy that we have, doing the legal challenges that we have, and engaging in diplomacy and trying to figure out if we can find a pathway. I did that in my very first conversation with Mark Carney's predecessor, and I will do the same thing with him. That's my job to do. And I'll over the summer, I'll be intending to, I mentioned this as well, that I'll be intending to do a what's next conversation and panel, travel the province, hear from people, see if there's other things that I'm not thinking of that they'd like us to do. But at the moment, I'm focused on those 9 issues that I raised and seeing if we can get some kind of repeal or accommodation to make sure that we really can start attracting investment to our province again.
Yeah, follow up.
Premier, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of coal-fired power stations being built around the world right now. Given that, why is Ottawa so fixated on making Canadians pay, particularly for items like carbon capture and storage, which have almost no effect at all on global emissions?
Well, I think there's been a movement in the last year, maybe longer, probably longer, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the instability in natural gas prices. There's been also a court decision out of The Hague with involving Shell, where they determined that if Shell was not producing natural gas, it would just mean that more coal was being produced, which would mean that it would increase emissions. And so it was pretty clear that the recognition that natural gas is a way to reduce global emissions. We've already shown leadership on that. We face, albeit probably too early and at too great an expense, phased out coal in Alberta in favor of natural gas, which resulted in a 53% reduction in emissions. So we've seen that. We've made major progress with our environment minister as well on reducing methane emissions by 45%. And there's more work to do there, and I think we can. The rest of the world, and I think there's an opportunity at G7 taking place in Kananaskis in June, and I would hope the world leaders adopt a resolution that nuclear and natural gas are both clean energy options because the alternatives are just so much more damaging. So that's one part of it, and that's what I've been advocating for. And I think that there are other world leaders who are looking at doing the same. I can tell you, Japan and Korea are very, very keen to get more natural gas liquids as well as more liquefied natural gas from us so that they can continue to reduce their emissions profile so that they don't have to look at coal as an option. And I think all the Asian countries are in a similar boat. So I think we have a bit of a change of heart coming. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go back to doing coal-fired electricity, although I note with interest that my neighbor in Saskatchewan has decided to do exactly that because they hadn't phased out their coal plants themselves. But the other part I think we cannot underestimate is why China is bringing on coal-fired electricity. They're building coal plants on spec in anticipation they will need that power to fuel the AI data race. And I think we have to be very clear about what happens if China wins the race to manufacture intelligence. That is what AI is. We cannot allow China to win that race. That has to be a race that we win in the free countries of the world, in North America in particular. And we have the ability to do that, along with our friends in Quebec, who have been at the absolute lead in developing data centers, and many of their companies are looking at investing here. And part of the reason they're looking at investing here is because of our value proposition, to have the ability to produce natural gas-fired electricity with low emissions. And that is exactly why we need to have the freedom, as we are going to argue in the court, to be able to have control over our natural gas, have control over our electricity grid, and be able to work with those nations who want to invest in this AI data race to be able to make sure that we win that race.
Wow, we just learned so much from that press conference. That's why I allowed it to play out. First, I just want to mention, I personally don't want Alberta going anywhere. I want our country to be together as one. We are stronger together. However, after a decade of Ottawa crushing the West with their green agenda, which makes no sense, by the way, because we just heard from Danielle Smith, natural gas emits 50% less emissions than coal. We could offset the world's emissions with Canada's natural gas. The real question becomes, Mark Carney being a pragmatist, as he describes in his election campaign, will he move away from his net zero values, his book, and that's how he is. His values is the world needs to get to net zero, which if he changes his mind on that, that completely goes against everything he stands for. Or will he cave to Alberta because Alberta is on the line? Because when Alberta energy goes up by 35% because of Ottawa's demand to get to net zero, and there's rolling blackouts across the province. Just look at Europe, for example. Last week, Spain almost had a catastrophic collapse of their electrical grid because there was zero wind. Yeah, they almost lost all power because of that. And will Albertans and the West continue to accept the economic decline we've seen over the last decade? At what point does Alberta just say, enough is enough, we are out? As we heard from Danielle Smith, I share the same sentiment as Albertans. 50% of the population wants to ride it out and give Mark Carney a chance and see if he could get it done. And see if Mark Carney will allow the development of natural resources and pipelines north, south, east, west across Canada and get our resources to the world. But that would go completely against his core values. Or is it like the other 50% that says enough is enough? We've had 10 years of liberals telling us what to do. And as a result, we've seen the destruction that it has caused. We're ready to leave. This is a rapidly developing situation, and I will be monitoring it closely. If you don't want to miss any of my reports, make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit that notification button, and leave a comment. What do you think's going to happen? And what do you want to happen? That's another thing. Why can't we just all get along? It's hard to do since our children's future is on the line. I will see you on the next report.